The wind on Thessari 9 did not howl like wind on Earth. It screamed, low and long, like something alive that had lost its way. Daniel Hale had heard that scream every winter for the past 4 years, ever since he took the Outpost engineer job nobody else wanted. He was used to it by now. He was not used to what he heard underneath it that night. It was a cry, small, broken, and almost swallowed by the storm. Daniel stopped his sled and cut the engine. Snow slammed into his visor. He told himself it was probably a rock cat, or the wind playing tricks, or his own tired mind. But the cry came again, and this time he was certain. It was not the wind. He followed the sound off the marked supply trail, into a stretch of drifted snow that no sled had any business crossing. His boots sank to the knee with every step. The cold bit through his suit's heating coils, but he kept moving, flashlight cutting a thin white tunnel through the dark. He found her half buried near a fallen slab of blue ice, wings tangled around a body no bigger than a large dog. Her scales were pale blue and white, dusted with frost, and one wing bent at a wrong angle. She was shivering so hard her whole body shook the snow around her. When the light hit her eyes, she flinched and let out that same broken cry, weaker this time. Daniel had read the Outpost briefings. He knew what a Skytharn hatchling looked like, even if he had never seen one this close. He knew the treaty rules too: no contact, no interference, report, and withdraw. He knelt down anyway. "Hey," he said, voice low, the way he used to talk to spooked animals back home. "Hey, easy. I'm not going to hurt you." She bared small teeth at him, more out of fear than threat, and tried to crawl backward. The movement made her cry out again, favoring the bent wing. Daniel's chest tightened. He had seen enough broken things in his life to know pain when it looked back at him. "Okay," he muttered. "Okay, easy." He pulled off his outer coat and moved slow, the way he would with a wounded workhorse, letting her see his hands before he touched her. She snapped at the coat once, then stopped, exhausted, and let him wrap it around her shaking body. Up close, she was lighter than he expected. Too light. She had not eaten in a long time. The trip back to the Outpost took twice as long with her cradled against his chest instead of strapped in the sled. The storm did not let up once. By the time the Outpost lights came into view, Daniel's arms had gone numb, and the little dragon had stopped shivering, which scared him more than the shivering had. He did not take her to the medical bay. He did not report anything. He carried her straight to his quarters, sealed the door, and laid her on a folded blanket near the heater vent. His hands remembered things from another life, a life before this frozen posting, when he had patched up injured animals on a farm that no longer existed anywhere but in his memory. He set the wing as best he could, wrapped it, and mixed warm broth from his ration kit. She would not eat at first. She lay curled tight, watching him with one eye, her small chest rising and falling too fast. Daniel sat on the floor across from her, not too close, and waited. An hour passed, then 2. Near midnight, she finally uncurled enough to sniff at the bowl he had left within reach. She ate slowly, then faster, then all at once, like her body had remembered it was allowed to be hungry. Daniel let out a breath he did not know he had been holding. "There you go," he said softly. "That's it." When she finished, she did not curl back into her tight, frightened ball. Instead, she crawled toward him, dragging her wrapped wing carefully, and pressed her small body against his leg. Daniel went still, unsure what to do with the sudden warmth of trust. Slowly, carefully, he rested a hand on her back. She did not flinch this time. She looked up at him with wide, storm-blue eyes, and made a sound low in her throat, something between a chirp and a word. It took Daniel a moment to understand it, and when he did, something cracked open in his chest that he had kept closed for a very long time. "Dad." It was not perfect. It came out rough, half-formed, more feeling than word. But there was no mistaking it. Daniel stared at her, throat tight, and for the first time since he had arrived on this frozen, lonely rock of a planet, he did not feel alone. "Yeah," he said finally, voice cracking. "Yeah, okay." Outside, the storm kept screaming across the ice. Inside, for the first time in years, Daniel Hale smiled. He did not know yet that somewhere in the mountains beyond the Outpost, an old and powerful creature was searching the wreckage of a storm-torn nest, calling a name that would never be answered, because the one who should have answered it was asleep by a heater vent, warm at last, wrapped in a human's old coat. He did not know the storm outside was about to become the smallest of his problems. By morning, the secret was already dying. Daniel had meant to keep her hidden for a few days, just until her wing healed enough to think clearly about what came next. But a supply outpost with 40 people did not keep secrets well, and a hungry baby dragon chirping through thin walls did not help. It was Ostrom from the water treatment team who heard it first, on his way to the morning shift, and by breakfast half the outpost knew something was living in Daniel's quarters that should not be. Commander Reyes did not bother knocking. She walked straight in, took one look at the small blue-scaled creature curled on Daniel's blanket, and closed her eyes like she already had a headache. "Tell me that is not what I think it is." "She was dying in the snow," Daniel said. "I wasn't going to leave her there." "Do you have any idea what the treaty says about this? Any contact with a Scytharn juvenile is supposed to go through command, full stop. If their scouts find out we're holding one of their young." "I'm not holding her. She's hurt. She needed help." "That's not your call to make, Daniel." "It was the only call I could make," he said, and something in his voice made Reyes stop. She looked at him properly then, not as a rule breaker, but as a man who had not raised his voice about anything in the 4 years she had known him, until now. It was Dr. Lila Novak who broke the standoff, arriving breathless, having heard the news from 3 different people on her way over. She was the Outpost xenobiologist, and the moment she saw the hatchling, her frustration turned instantly into fascination. "May I?" she asked, kneeling slowly. The hatchling pressed closer to Daniel's leg, wary, but did not flee. Lila examined the splinted wing with careful hands. "This is good work. Clean set. Whoever did this knew what they were doing." "I grew up around animals," Daniel said simply. Lila looked up at Reyes. "Commander, if we report this through normal channels, best case, the Scytharn take her back, and we lose any goodwill this could have bought us. Worst case, they assume we caused this, and it becomes an incident. But if we handle this carefully, return her ourselves, show we cared for her, show good faith, this could actually help relations instead of hurting them." Reyes crossed her arms, thinking. The outpost had spent 3 years in careful, wary peace with the Scytharn, ever since the border skirmishes that had cost lives on both sides. Peace built on distance and distrust. This was the first real contact anyone had made since. She stays contained, medical oversight only. And the second her wing is fit to fly, we arrange contact with the Scytharn and hand her back, properly, formally, with an apology for the delay, Reyes said. "Are we clear?" Daniel looked down at the small creature pressed against his leg, and felt something twist in his chest at the word "hand her back." He nodded anyway, because there was no argument he could make that would win. "Clear." Reyes left. Lila lingered a moment longer, watching the hatchling watch Daniel with open, trusting eyes. "She's imprinted on you," Lila said quietly. "That's not normal Scytharn behavior with strangers. Not this fast. Maybe she doesn't see me as a stranger. Maybe not." Lila stood, brushing off her knees. "I'll bring feeding schedules and check on the wing daily. Try not to name her, Daniel. It'll be harder to let go if you do." But it was already too late for that particular warning, because in Daniel's head, without ever meaning to, he had already started calling her Sable, for the storm dark gray that edged her pale blue scales, like the underside of a snow cloud. Over the following days, Sable grew faster than either Daniel or Lila expected. Her wing healed clean within a week, far quicker than any earth animal Daniel had ever nursed. Her body lengthened, her chirps sharpened into real words, and her curiosity became almost impossible to contain within one small room. She learned Daniel's name for the tools in his workshop before she learned most Scytharn words. Lila tried teaching her from old translation records. She followed him everywhere his duties allowed, tail curled contentedly around his ankle when she could not fly. The rest of the outpost, wary at first, slowly warmed the way people always warm to something young and trusting. Engineers left scraps of food by the workshop door. Reyes stopped scowling every time she passed and started, quietly, checking on the hatchling's progress herself. But out past the ridgeline, in the high frozen peaks where the Scytharn made their home, the search for a missing hatchling had not stopped. It had only grown more desperate and more dangerous with every day she was not found. Daniel did not know this yet. He only knew that each morning, when he woke, Sable was already awake, watching him with those storm blue eyes, waiting for him to open them so she could say the word she had learned first and loved best. Dad. And every morning, it broke his heart a little more, knowing that word would not be his to keep forever. 3 weeks changed Sable more than Daniel thought possible. She had come to him small enough to cradle in his arms. Now she stood nearly to his waist, wings broad and steady, scales shifting from soft hatchling blue to a deeper, storm cloud shade edged in silver. Lila measured her growth twice a week, and each time shook her head at the numbers, muttering about growth rates that made no sense for a species this size. She shouldn't be this big this fast, Lila said one afternoon, running a scanner along Sable's back while the young dragon patiently endured it, eyes fixed on Daniel across the room. Either Skytharn juveniles grow faster than our old records say, or something about her situation is speeding things up. Does it matter why? Daniel asked. It might, Lila said. Fast growth in young animals is sometimes a stress response. She could be growing this quickly because some part of her still remembers being alone in that storm and doesn't feel safe yet. Daniel looked over at Sable, who chose that exact moment to abandon the scanner and cross the room to press her head against his side, the way she did a dozen times a day now, like she needed to check he was still there. He rested a hand between her horns and felt the tension in her shoulders ease at once. She's safe, he said quietly. She just doesn't always believe it yet. Lila did not argue with that. Daniel had started teaching her more than just words. He taught her to sit outside the workshop while he worked instead of underfoot, taught her simple signals with his hands that she picked up faster than any words, taught her the boundaries of the outpost so she would not wander into the perimeter sensors and set off alarms. She learned all of it eagerly, always watching his face for the small nod that meant she had done well. In turn, she taught him things too, though she did not mean to. She taught him what it felt like to be needed by something that trusted him completely, without condition, without memory of who he used to be or what he had lost. On the farm, back before the colony ship, before everything, Daniel had been someone's father. That life had ended in a fire he still dreamed about some nights. He had told himself for years that part of him was finished, packed away with everything else he had buried when he took this posting at the edge of nowhere. Sable did not know that story. She only knew the man who had pulled her out of the snow, and the word that fit him better than any other word she had learned. But peace, as it always did out here, did not last. It was Reyes who brought the news, stepping into the workshop with a tightness in her jaw that told Daniel something had shifted before she said a word. Border sensors picked up movement 3 days running, she said. Skytharn scouts, working a grid search pattern along the ridge, getting closer to the outpost each time. They're looking for something. Daniel's stomach dropped. Sable, sensing the change in the room, moved closer to him, ears, or the ridged plates that served as ears, flattening slightly. They're looking for her, he said. That's my read too, Reyes said. Which means we're running out of time to control how this goes. If they find her on their own, stumbling onto a human outpost holding a hatchling, that goes badly no matter how well we've cared for her. We need to make contact first, on our terms, and explain everything before assumptions turn into an incident. Lila nodded slowly. Agreed. But it has to be handled right. Skytharn value directness and honesty above almost everything else in their culture, from what the old contact logs say. If we come to them with the truth, plainly, it might actually work in our favor. And if it doesn't? Daniel asked. Nobody answered that. That night, Daniel sat with Sable curled against his side, her breathing slow and even in sleep, one wing draped protectively over his arm even in her rest. He thought about the fire that had taken his first family, the years of silence afterward, and how strange it was that the universe had handed him a second chance at this in the unlikeliest form possible, a lost hatchling from the sky, calling him by a name he thought he had buried for good. He thought, too, about what it would mean to lose her now. I'm not giving you up easy, he murmured into the dark, more to himself than to her. Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know that. Sable stirred slightly in her sleep, tail tightening around his leg. 3 days, and he was not alone. The elder's name was Vosk, and he filled the outpost's meeting hall in a way that had nothing to do with his size, though he was large enough that the ceiling felt suddenly low. His scales were pale silver blue, weathered with age, and his eyes held the particular sharpness of grief that as Reyes met him with 3 of her senior staff, formal and careful, every word chosen with precision. Daniel stood near the back, Sable pressed against his leg, half hidden behind him, though she was far too large now to truly hide. 3 weeks ago, Vosk said, his translated voice flat and controlled in a way that made the control itself unsettling. A storm took my daughter's life on the western ridge, and with her, my granddaughter's nest was destroyed. We searched the wreckage for 6 days. We found no trace of the hatchling. We assumed the worst. His gaze swept the room and stopped on Sable. Something in his expression cracked open, just slightly. Until 3 days ago, when our scouts found human tracks leading from that exact site toward this outpost. Reyes stepped forward. Elder Vosk, I want to be honest with you, plainly, the way I understand your people value. One of my crew found your granddaughter half buried in the snow, injured, and near death. He brought her here and cared for her. We should have contacted your people immediately, and we did not, and for that delay, I apologize without excuse. But she has been cared for. She has been safe. Vosk's eyes had not left Sable since he entered the room. Come here, little one, he said, voice softening into something almost tender. Vosk's expression flickered, confusion breaking through the grief. Sable, it is grandfather. You do not need to be afraid. Still, she did not move. Daniel felt her trembling against him and, without thinking, rested a hand on her head, the same gesture that had calmed her 100 times before. It worked now, too. Her trembling eased slightly, though she still did not step toward the elder waiting for her. Vosk's gaze shifted to Daniel, and the room went very still. You are the one who found her. Yes, Daniel said. She is afraid of me. It was not a question. It was worse than that. It was a wound, spoken aloud. I am her family. She doesn't know that anymore, Daniel said carefully. Not the way she knows it now. She was alone in the snow, hurt and terrified, for longer than any of us know. I don't think she remembers much before that. I think, right now, the only safety she knows is the safety she's found since. And that safety is you. Vosk's voice had an edge now, sharpened by grief he was clearly struggling to master. A human she has known for 3 weeks. I know how that sounds. Do you? Vosk took a step forward, and every human in the room tensed, though he made no aggressive move beyond that. My people and yours have shared this world in careful peace for 3 years, a peace built on distance, because peace was easier than trust. Now I find my granddaughter, alive, calling a human father, refusing to come to her own blood. Tell me, human, how I am meant to understand that as anything but theft. The word landed hard in the quiet room. Reyes opened her mouth to respond, but Daniel spoke first, quietly, without anger. I didn't take anything from you, Elder Vosk. I found something the storm nearly took from all of us. I didn't know she was your granddaughter when I pulled her out of that snow. I just knew she was dying, and I couldn't leave her there. Whatever she calls me now, I never once tried to make her forget where she came from. I don't even know your people's language well enough to have tried. Vosk studied him for a long moment, grief and fury and something more complicated warring behind his old, sharp eyes. Then, slowly, deliberately, he crouched low, bringing himself down to Sable's height, and extended one clawed hand, palm open, in what was clearly meant as an offering rather than a demand. Sable, he said gently, do you know who I am? Sable studied him for a long, silent moment, head tilted, some flicker of memory or instinct working behind her storm-blue eyes. Slowly, she stepped out from behind Daniel's leg, not toward Vosk, but sideways, close enough to look at him properly without leaving Daniel's side entirely. Grandfather, she said finally, the word coming out soft and uncertain, more question than answer. Vosk's breath caught audibly, but when he reached toward her, she flinched back and pressed once more against Daniel's leg, wings curling protectively inward. Dad, she said, quieter this time, almost apologetic, as though she understood somehow that the word was causing pain in the room and did not know how to take it back. Vosk slowly withdrew his hand and rose to his full height, staring at the two of them, the young dragon and the human she would not leave, with an expression none of the humans in the room could quite read. This, he said finally, is not a conversation for one evening. I will not take her by force from someone she trusts, whatever claim of blood I hold. But I will not leave this world without answers either. His gaze fixed on Daniel with an intensity that felt like being measured and weighed all at once. Tomorrow, human, you and I will speak. Alone. The meeting took place outside the outpost walls, on neutral ground between two watch posts, at Vosk's insistence. He wanted no walls between them. He said, no human structure to shape the conversation. Daniel walked out alone, as agreed. Though he knew Reyes and half the outpost security team were watching from the perimeter, ready for the worst. Vosk was already waiting, seated on the packed snow with the patience of something ancient, watching the gray morning sky. Sit, Vosk said, not unkindly, and Daniel did, close enough for conversation, far enough to show respect. For a long moment, neither spoke. The wind moved quietly between them, nothing like the screaming storm from 3 weeks before. I have lived a long time, Vosk said finally. I have seen humans and Skytharn fight over this ridge, over water rights, over old wounds neither side remembers starting anymore. I did not expect, in all that time, to sit across from a human and find myself unable to hate him for loving my granddaughter. Daniel said nothing, letting the old dragon find his own way through it. Explain it to me, Vosk continued. Not the story of the storm. I have heard that already from your commander. I want to understand why. You are not Skytharn. She is not your kind. You owed her nothing. Why did a human risk his position, his safety, everything, for a creature he had never seen before that night? Daniel thought about it carefully before answering, because he understood this was not a question Vosk was asking lightly. Where I come from, he said slowly. There's an old saying. You don't leave anything to die in the snow if there's a chance you can save it. Doesn't matter what it is. Doesn't matter whose it is. If it's crying and it's freezing and you can do something about it, you do something about it. That's not a rule someone taught me. That's just what you do, if you're any good at all. A simple answer, Vosk said, for a very complicated result. Simple things usually are complicated once you follow them far enough, Daniel said. I had a family once. Lost them a long time ago, back on a colony ship that doesn't exist anymore. I came out here because it was easier to be alone than to remember what it felt like not to be. Then I heard her crying in the snow, and some part of me that I thought was gone for good just answered. I didn't plan on any of this, Elder Vosk. I didn't plan on loving her. It just happened, the way it happens. Vosk was quiet for a long moment, his ancient eyes distant. My daughter used to say something similar about her own hatchlings. That love does not ask permission. It simply arrives, and then you spend the rest of your life proving it was worth the trouble. Sounds like she was right. She was. Vosk's voice roughened slightly. I lost her in that storm. I nearly lost Sable too, and I did not know it until 3 days ago, when I let myself hope again for the first time in weeks. You gave me that hope back, human, even if you did not mean to. He turned to face Daniel fully. My people value loyalty above nearly everything. Above pride. Above old grievances. Above blood itself, when blood fails to show up and a stranger does instead. What you have done for her, whatever your reasons, is loyalty of the highest kind I have witnessed in many long years. What does that mean for what happens next? Vosk considered the question carefully. It means I will not tear a hatchling from the only safety she has left, simply to satisfy my own grief. But it also means I cannot simply walk away and pretend she is not my blood. So I propose something neither of our peoples have tried in the years since the border wars ended. He met Daniel's eyes directly. Shared guardianship. She remains here, with you, as she clearly needs. But she comes to the mountains regularly, to know her people, her language, her history. And I ask that you, human, learn something of us as well, so that when she is grown, she understands both halves of what she is, instead of only one. Daniel felt something loosen in his chest that had been tight since the moment Vosk's envoy arrived at the gates. I can agree to that. Good, Vosk said, rising to his full height. Because there is a second matter, and it will not wait as gently as the first. Daniel rose too, wary at the sudden shift in Vosk's tone. What matter? My scouts spotted movement in the lower passes this morning. Armed raiders, not Skytharn, not outpost humans. Outlaws who have preyed on both our peoples before, when the border was weaker. They move toward this outpost even now, likely believing a lone frontier station makes easy prey. Vosk's eyes hardened into something fierce and ancient. If they come, human, they will find more defending this place than they expect. Daniel's blood ran cold, and behind him, faint but unmistakable, he heard the outpost's perimeter alarm begin to wail. The alarm cut through the cold morning air, and within minutes the outpost transformed from a quiet frontier station into a scramble of shouted orders and running feet. Reyes met Daniel and Vosk at the gate, already armored, already barking commands into her comm. Raiders, she confirmed grimly. 6, maybe 8, coming up the lower pass on stolen sleds. They'll hit the perimeter within the hour. My scouts saw the same, Vosk said. These are the same raiders who struck a Skytharn hunting party 2 seasons past. They take what is not defended and kill what tries to stop them. Daniel's first thought was not of raiders or perimeters or defenses. It was of Sable, still inside the workshop, likely already awake and frightened by the alarm. He turned to go to her, but Vosk's voice stopped him. She will not stay hidden, human. Not now that she is old enough to sense danger to those she loves. Better she is with you, where you can watch her, than alone and frightened somewhere in this station. He was right, and Daniel knew it even as every protective instinct in him screamed otherwise. He found Sable pacing anxiously by the workshop door, wings half spread, and the moment she saw him, she pressed against him hard enough to nearly knock him over. Stay close, he told her. Whatever happens, stay close to me. The raiders hit the northern perimeter faster than expected, their sleds cutting black scars across the white snow, weapons already firing on the outer sensor towers. Outpost security returned fire, but the raiders were well armed and well practiced, clearly expecting an easy, undefended target. What they did not expect was Vosk descending from the gray sky, like a silver-blue storm given shape, scattering 2 sleds with a single sweeping pass before they could even register the threat. Skytharn warriors followed close behind him, wings dark against the pale morning light, turning what should have been a simple raid into chaos for the attackers. Daniel fought on the ground, alongside Reyes and the Outpost security team, using every scrap of training he had, driven by something sharper than duty. Sable stayed close as promised, but as the fighting stretched on, one raider broke through the line, sled angling straight toward Daniel's exposed flank, weapon already raised. Sable moved before Daniel even registered the danger. She was still young, still growing into the strength her body was only beginning to hold, but 3 weeks of fear and love and fierce, fast-growing loyalty poured into that single moment. She slammed into the raider's sled with a force that sent it spinning off course, wings buffeting snow into a blinding wall, a sound tearing from her throat that was nothing like the frightened cries of the hatchling Daniel had found in the storm. The raider, thrown and disoriented, did not get a second chance to aim. Reyes' team moved in fast, and within minutes, the attack had collapsed entirely, the surviving raiders fleeing back down the pass under a combined pursuit of human weapons fire and Skytharn wings. When the dust and snow finally settled, Daniel found Sable trembling, not from fear this time, but from the aftermath of adrenaline and effort, wings folded tight, watching him with wide eyes to make sure he was truly unharmed. He pulled her close without a word, and she pressed her head hard against his chest, breathing unsteady. You didn't have to do that, he murmured. Family, she said simply, the word rough but clear, and something about hearing it from her, after everything, undid something in Daniel that he did not try to hide. Vosk landed nearby, feathers of snow scattering from his wings, and watched the 2 of them for a long moment before speaking. In all my years, he said, I have never seen a hatchling fight to protect anyone before her first flight season. Not for pride. Not for territory, for family alone. He looked to Reyes, then to Daniel. What happened here today should not be forgotten by either of our peoples. A human protected my blood without asking anything in return. My blood protected a human the same way. That is not the story of 2 separate peoples living beside each other out of necessity. That is the beginning of something else. In the weeks that followed, the story of the attack and its aftermath spread far beyond the outpost, reaching human colonies and Skytharn peaks alike. What began as one man's quiet decision not to leave a crying hatchling in the snow became, slowly and deliberately, the foundation of the first true alliance between their 2 peoples. Trade routes opened, old grievances set aside, watch posts shared instead of guarded against each other. Years later, when Sable had grown into her full strength, broad-winged and silver blue like her grandfather, she would still return to the Outpost every season, landing outside the same workshop where she had once slept curled against a heater vent in a stranger's old coat. Daniel would step outside to meet her, older now, grayer, but steady in the way he had always been. She would lower her great head to his level, the way she had as a hatchling, and say the word that had never once changed, no matter how much else had. Dad. And every time, Daniel Hale, once the loneliest man on a frozen frontier world, would smile the same way he had that very first storm-racked night, like a man who had learned, against every expectation, that family was never about where you came from, but about who chose to stay.